Whether you keep them in your home or love to see them in theirs, these are the creatures that bring us all together.
Reptiles. We're going to be delving into the experiences of reptile lovers from around the block and around the world. This is the Reptile Talk Podcast. Boom! What is going on, everybody? This is Jeremy Turgeon from Brassman Reptiles.
And I'm Rob, and I'm creeping it real.
Hey, we didn't mess it up this week.
Hey.
So forgive the tardiness. I had to go handle some things after my consulting gig here in Georgia. So that
Was it at least cool?
Huh?
Was it at least something cool?
It was at least cool, although you wouldn't be excited about the number of berms that existed. So, but other than that, it was pretty cool. Sorry, Rob.
That's okay. It's
oh,
okay.
Man.
I'll forgive you this time.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll fill you in afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah. Bam. So what's up, guys? I hope everybody in the live chat is also going to forgive me for being late. But yeah, thank you guys so much for jumping on. I'm super excited because we're talking with Steve Tillis tonight.
Pumped.
Steve Tillis, who, if you haven't caught we did 1 or 2 episodes with Steve already.
Yes, 2.
2? Okay, that's what I thought, 2. If you haven't checked out those episodes, you really need to go back in the history of Reptile Talk and check those out. Steve is a wealth of knowledge. I continuously tell him that I think his whole purpose for existing is to make me feel insignificant. And I truly mean that, especially when he posts things on his Instagram story of the cool cage designs he does. And when he's in the lab doing, lab things and whatever. But so I'm super excited. So today we're going to talk with Steve primarily just about reptile stuff, just about snake stuff, his snake stuff, what he's got going on.
Yeah.
Tillis. So as always, you guys, before I bring Steve on, we'll highlight this. Jay Muller in the house, throwing it out with the first super chat of the evening. You guys can certainly super chat in the comments. It will kind of dictate where we go. We'll highlight you guys. Of course, thank you for your generosity. And yeah, we're going to have a great time. So let's get Steve on and let's make it happen.
Boom, there he is.
There he is.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
So,
it's been a minute.
I think real quick, I'll do a quick 15-second blurb here. If anybody doesn't know the history of Reptile Talk, the OG Reptile Talk existed with me and Steve when we were hot shit teenagers.
Yeah, no kidding. I realize that I always I don't listen to your podcast live. I always go back and listen to it at 1.5 speed. And so I always forget that you guys don't talk super your theme song is always, I remind myself that it's slower and that yep.
That's smart though. You could probably get through more of them in a shorter amount of time.
Oh yeah. No, I burn through podcasts in the lab, so.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Oh man. Dude, well, I'm super excited that we get a chance to talk to you and specifically talk about what you have happening over there in your wonderful world of a lot of baby snakes.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it has definitely been just a weird year on a lot of different levels. So, it was a banner production year, and then, in combination with some of the FWC law changes here, I'm having to make changes in my facility to, kind of keep my existing large constrictors. So, yeah, it's definitely been an interesting year.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only imagine. So, I guess we can jump right in kind of on that. So the FWC rule changes definitely affected you, and you had to do a whole lot of changes to your facility. So what were some of those changes that were maybe the most extreme things that you had to do?
Yeah, so at the base of it, so the law change was prompted to kind of address tegus and iguanas in the state, and certainly as it pertains to tegus, that is something that is needed addressing in the state for quite a while. But what they kind of did in the process of sweeping up with that is they got rid of what was the conditional species program, which was the large constrictors and stuff like that. which has allowed kind of commercial applications of some of these species in addition to education and various options, even like that. They went ahead and designated all of those species as prohibited now, which has much kind of higher requirements in terms of being able to meet facility requirements and stuff like that, which, on the one hand, there's an argument that raising the bar is, a noble intention in terms of trying to regulate the market around some of these large snakes, but functionally what has worked out for me, so a lot of snakes I have are, I have berms that I've had for the past 7 years that I collected down in South Florida that, I've bred and made available to researchers. So there was one study that we're working on where it's kind of, we harvested eggs at certain points during incubation to then test sex development to see at what point we can start detecting via test kind of sex differentiation in pythons and eggs. So, offering animals for various purposes like that, but, they're still maintained under private ownership. So when this law took into effect, where I'm pursuing now is more of an educational track for these animals, which they have an option to do, I guess that would be like a visitation type exhibition, but the requirements on that are a bit trickier, and it kind of fit within my 3 to 5 year plan to start working on some of the things that I wanted to do here at this facility. And so functionally what I've had to do is rush the timeline on kind of opening up, I guess the best way to describe it would be kind of like a nature center, but really kind of more in tune with managing some of these captive species.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
And yeah, so part of that has involved turning the building that I had on property into a display building, and then getting in an additional building as I'm kind of putting that as a I guess showroom of biosecurity. So that is my take on a biosecure colony, which I'm just now working on finishing that up, and it's really cool. But the exhibition building, what I ended up doing is turned basically one 20-foot wall of the building, split it kind of in half. So I have two 10-foot cages. And those cages all funnel into a freedom breeder rack at the base of it. Kind of 2 levels of freedom breeder that's locked into the cage. And so each cage is kind of split into 4 parts with these modular dividers. So essentially I can, without touching a single snake, move the snakes all the way across the enclosure into a holding rack, lock that holding rack, roll it out and onto the back of the truck if I ever needed to do, emergency evacuation. It is a really extra system, but the application is more the system itself, that you're able to manage these animals in a very safe way, kind of in a protected contact way. And then, basically I've made it so that I can handle all of my large constrictors with one person. So because there's no direct interaction necessarily. And so it is not necessarily that I predict I'll ever need to make use of that application, but in terms of just, displaying the concept of a shift system for reptiles that goes into a centralized unit that can be, evacuated a lot easier. I'm really kind of taking this display building and making it kind of a showroom for all of my otherwise odd ideas, I guess, and so that pertains to caging these large constrictors and stuff like that. So, one cage is a big Burmese python cage, and it's kind of starts with like a oak hammock that kind of will cascade down into like kind of a little Everglades type watery area, and then underneath is like a limestone cave like you'd see in Florida, because they are literally berms I removed from South Florida. And the flip side of that is going to be a big retic cage with more of a focus on arboreal options, where you can kind of again shift them to. So the other challenge I have is that I'm not allowed to have males and female snakes share the same cage anymore.
Right.
So essentially, I am having to, or I'm making my cages where I have the option to kind of cycle them through. So I can put in a mesh divider because these dividers are modular. So I can still sense each other, but I'm not, they're not sharing the same cage. They're not going to be breeding or anything like that. So I'm not, crossing the line on that aspect of it. But, part of that is designing this kind of arboreal shift cage system for retics to kind of give them the option of climbing. And so again, it's a realistic take on, what a new generation of large constrictor caging could look like in a way that really emphasized safety of these animals, but also, just in a way that is way more manageable.
That's awesome. And you were posting on your story that the berm is actually using a lot of that tree to climb. You're seeing a lot more activity out of it like that.
Yeah. So the berm cage I set up, where the max height is probably around about 5 foot. And I've been very surprised about how much they make use of that. And yeah, the amount of behavior that you're able to see when you just give them that opportunity has been something that genuinely surprised me, because, I built a berm cage with some height because I wanted it to look like something, not because I really expected them to make use of that.
Utilize it.
Yeah. But yeah, no,
yeah, I think it's just interesting because a couple of people I know who have caught wild berms, they say that the muscle tone on wild berms is completely different than all the captive berms that you ever touch.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. And I've talked about it, I think, on here before, where, I can't raise a Burmese python in captivity with the same head size as a wild snake. Like they're always pin-headed, and I have no idea why. I've tried every different feeding configuration. I think what I've started to narrow down on is really fluffy bird prey. So prey that like really stretches the jaws, but doesn't really give a whole lot of caloric,
Nutrients,
return.
Yeah.
I think that is starting to get me closer to a head shape that looks closer to wild, but even then, I don't even know that I'm, it's not like the sample size is all that great, and it's not like I have a prospect of raising up a whole lot more of them. So,
Yeah.
Maybe Rob could do that for you.
Nah, I'm all set.
Yeah, right. No, it really is interesting. The South Florida berms, I mean, you can, maybe I'm cheated, but to the point now where like I can see a photo of a normal Burmese python and tell if it came out of South Florida or not. Like they have a look. And it's very pretty look. Like the normal berms that come out of South Florida are just absolutely insanely gorgeous. So
that's super cool. It's cool that in the grand scheme of things, short period of time, these animals have kind of developed their own physiology.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's a wild world we live in. Florida especially is, just the epicenter of a bunch of weird clashing species. So
oh, that's
but
crazy.
Yeah, it's been pretty cool. So I've also kind of put new concepts in terms of maybe new way of rack producing animals and stuff like that. Really kind of leveraging some of the next steps in husbandry that kind of is looking for an in-between path of, there's a big push right now for bioactive and naturalistic setups. And, I think that's a really good thing. And I would really like to see what that kind of looks like when applied at scale. And that's really kind of the idea niche I feel like I've carved out for myself.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah.
Absolutely, dude.
It's interesting to see the amount of people that are hopping onto the isopod like train and really getting invested in not just like, oh, I just got some like dwarf purple isopods. They're getting like 10 or 20 different species of isopods and all breeding all the different kinds and everything.
Yeah, I think I'm at like 40 some odd either species or types. Yeah.
Friggin' roll out.
There's a lot to like about isopods. There's a lot to like about them. I think there's a lot of excitement around them, and I think it's justified.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
It's like a betta
favorite
fish that you keep in dirt,
True.
My favorite type, what are they? The Bolivari, I think they're like big and yellow and super prehistoric looking. I did not do well with them. Like they were one of the few I had that like did not do well for me at all, unfortunately. But they were just, it was like I don't know, just holding a fossil in your hand. It is so absurd.
Hell yeah.
Because I mean, they maxed out at like 1.5 inches or something like that, which is like, it's a sizable creature to have on you that looks like a living fossil.
True.
You got a little trilobite just cruising in your hand.
Exactly.
Hell yeah. That's badass.
Hell yeah. Okay, so this year has been an amazingly successful year for you. You might say too successful.
Yeah, no, yeah. It has definitely been a stress test on the infrastructure here. Like, I had retained the amount of caging and stuff. I always made sure I have enough worst best case scenario, but I just never envisioned ever having to like actually utilize that. Where again, I've been jokingly calling it like the snake math year, where like whenever someone first gets into like especially ball pythons, they do what I call the snake math, where like they have, if I have 10 females and they all breed my bumblebee and 25% of them, they all lay 6 eggs and every single one of them hatches and the ratios work out perfectly, that's snake math. But that actually happened to me this year, and in the 11 years of that I've been doing this, I've never had anything like it. Where again, it was literally 100% of the blood pythons I attempted to breed this year bred, even the ones that like halfway through the season I was, quickly counting the ovulations and trying to backpedal on some of these females. But they all went. They almost all had good clutches, except for the ones that I backpedaled on, that had maybe half slugs or so, but like everything else was like 12 or more beautiful eggs, and they all went full term in incubation. And then it got even more absurd because most of my pairings are kind of like either new stuff I'm trying to prove out or new combinations. I try and keep a purpose with all of my breedings. So yeah, a lot of them are kind of long odds on some Mendelian genetics, and then it just even the Mendelian genetics were like not only like I do head to head, and it would be 40% visuals, like just absurd ratios on everything. I was like, I produced the Mocha Granite Borneos, which is like a 1 in 16 odds, and there was like 4 of them in like less than 20 eggs, like just absurd,
just crushing it.
Just shouldn't ever happen. Yeah. So it's been a fun year, and I've been able to really produce some outstanding stuff, some stuff that, and I try and be humble when I say it's outstanding, but I say that in a sense that like a lot of these projects I've kind of given up a lot of hope for, and so when you cut the egg and it is like 10 times anything past you're expecting, that's so cool. Just the the animals kind of put you in, give a return that you weren't even expecting.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm super pumped for that project, and every time that I see you posting pictures of those babies, I'm like, yes. It's just so exciting.
Everything that everything the Mocha seems to touch, it just does amazing stuff too, and it combined with such an interesting platform that Borneos have to offer anyway. It's such a cool project with so much you can do with it, and then you stack on top of that the double visual with the sunset, which is an incompatible second line of T positive, creates a T negative, and not just a T negative, but like a lavender albino T negative, like just
basically a T neg.
Basically, yeah. It is just such a beautiful, ridiculous animal, and again, like that's not even something you can think to hope for, that like these 2 T positives are going to compound into a T negative. So it just, it's so cool.
Dude, when you sent me the pictures of that thing in the egg, I was losing my mind. I was like, what the hell is that thing? Why is it so incredible? I cannot wait to see it when it's like this big.
Right, yeah. I didn't even do the math that it was a T negative until it was like all the way out and crawled over a sibling. And I was like, oh my God, you have red eyes, like straight up red eyes. Because up until that point, I was like, oh, that's a really weird animal. I don't really know what's going on with that. And then it just kind of clicked. But it is interesting. If you want, we can spend some time talking about albinism and hypo and all that jazz. So
Yeah, for real, because that's one of the things that I get people constantly asking me when it comes to
Yeah.
blood pythons and albinos is, well, what's the difference between T positive and what's the difference between T negative? Why do they have the T positive and T negative? Are they not albinos? And it's like, oh, here we go. They're just gonna spend the next 5 minutes, and then they're
Yeah.
probably gonna be like, okay, so it's not albino, and I'm like, okay, never mind. I don't.
Yeah. So for me, how I've kind of rephrased thinking in my mind is I kind of think of the whole thing as a melanin spectrum now, where you have like at the you know one extreme you have like a hypo, which is like well yeah. So one extreme you have the hypo, at the other extreme you have the T negative albino, and then maybe somewhere in the middle is a T positive. And so you can kind of think of this sliding scale of melanin production, and so you can slide it to a point where it's like halfway between a T positive and a T negative, and you get something like a lavender albino, or you can have various shades of caramel albino with ultramel ball pythons and stuff like that. And so I kind of, if you think about, so it's called a melanin production pathway. It's not how to make melanin. It is a pathway of all the things that go into making melanin. And there's a lot of knobs and dials and stuff that you can shut off or reduce the efficiency of, all the way down to the ultimate molecule, which is tyrosinase, which makes the melanin itself. And so we kind of get these arbitrary distinction of T positive or T negative, standing for tyrosinase albino. But that's not actually describing if the albino has tyrosinase itself. Like, it could have a perfectly functioning tyrosinase molecule that just had some mutation occur early in the pathway where some critical component isn't delivered that tyrosinase to be able to make melanin. And so functionally you have a T negative albino, even though tyrosinase is still there in the animal. Same thing with a T positive albino. Like, we know some melanin production is occurring because it's not, it doesn't have red eyes. It has some color.
Right.
But something is not working in all the ways that it should. There's some knob somewhere, some critical component that is not making it downstream in such a way to work at full efficiency. And so you can kind of scale that all the way back to hypo, which you can kind of think of as a really, really shallow albino. So if you think about it, like, hypo doesn't really tend to have much of an effect on stuff. Like, hypo doesn't have much of an effect on stuff that doesn't already have a bunch of black in it. Like, you think of a hypo bumblebee, it doesn't look the same as like a hypo cinnabee. Like, it's a shallow albino. It needs the melanin to be able to reflect whatever change. Whereas like
Whatever
a T negative
changes,
albino cinnabee, a T negative albino bumblebee, an albino ball python, they're not going to look as drastically different as the hypo, quote unquote, shallow albino. And so I've kind of placing arbitrary distinctions, relating this all back to my Borneo project, is I consider like the mocha to be a more shallow type of albino. So it's closer to the T positive hypo end of the spectrum. And because of that, the individual variation of the animal that it's being expressed in has a huge degree of what that animal looks like. If it has a bunch of black, it has a really distinct shade of purple. If it has, something a little bit more faded, so it's, you're able to see the distinctions in melanin way more, just way more variation compared to like the sunset, which seems to have a bit more tighter range of colors expressing, which might be maybe a less shallow albino, because you're not seeing that same, the input melanin that animal would otherwise have if it weren't albino is not playing as big of an expression in terms of how the albino actually looks. Yeah. And so you can kind of think that both of these albinos are messing with the melanin production process at two mysterious black box steps. And combined, the effects are not enough to make melanin at all efficiently. So the way I've kind of described it is that, like, you can think of like a big oil pipeline that has like dozens and dozens of inputs coming in, and all we're really seeing is how much oil is coming out of the end of that pipe. And so, if we see it go down a little, it's a hypo. If we see it go down a lot, it's a T positive. If we see it shut down entirely, well, the tyrosinase melanin factory clearly isn't doing anything, so it's a T negative. And so, if you kind of think of it in that context, and you have at some point these two albinos were able to shut down two critical steps, which in combination was enough to fully shut down the melanin oil production pathway. And the end result is, it's negative albino, which, on the surface level might appear confusing, but if you really think about what you're doing, which is fiddling in the melanin production pathway at two steps, it's not perhaps shocking that in combination that it really just goofed up the whole process.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people, they just look at it like, oh, it was a T positive albino and a T negative albino. It's different. And it's like, well, if you look at it on a deeper level, I think it's a very appropriate that it happened in Borneos, because if it happened in red blood pythons, people would be losing their minds. They'd be like, this doesn't make sense. People with Borneos are like, Borneos, they're just being weird. They're just being Borneos.
I mean, it just, like I said, if you think of hypo, T positive, and T negative at just arbitrary benchmarks that we've placed in the melanin production range, it kind of gets a little bit less fuzzy. You're able to make a little bit more rule bending as to T positive and T negative and why some stuff works out the way it does. I mean, even think about in ball pythons, you have Candina, which is essentially closer to a T positive albino that is allelic with a T negative albino. So, somewhere in that process, there's a form of that allele that's able to make at least a little bit of melanin. So, is it fair calling that a T negative albino? That tyrosinase is doing something. So
that's like the sharp albinos are compatible with the T positive, so it makes a paradigm boas.
Yeah, just goofy, all sorts of goofy stuff. So we try and carve out, we try and put things in boxes, but there's 26 different definitions of a species. So if we can't even agree on that, what is the T positive and T negative? But literally arbitrary benchmarks that we've thrown on the ground. So.
And then also, I was talking to a couple people about that sort of stuff, and they're like, the stuff that we call T positive albinos, they might actually be hypomelanistic. Most people are not testing to see if it's a T positive albino.
Like I said, it's a spectrum. So what test is it's 85% hypo. It's like just some. It's not helpful that we try and categorize things as such and then take it as gospel that these are like actual rules on the ground, when it's really just some crappy alleles replicating themselves and goofing up every once in a while.
Yeah. But if you come from the world of like, oh, this is a incomplete dominant ball python trait, this is a T negative, or this is a albino ball python, and this one is a caramel albino ball python.
No, see, where you went wrong is that you have to start at codominant and then explain why that's not a thing, and then you
got me there.
Yeah. Oh my God, 2004 was all a lie.
Yeah, can you imagine?
So I guess to give names to some of this stuff. So we've been talking about the Borneos. There's two different incompatible lines of T positive. There's the Mocha, which as far as I'm aware, I'm the only one that's produced those, at least at this point. Some of those animals have now been made it out to people. And then the Sunset, which has been produced by a couple of other different people, which is a different incompatible line, T positive albino. I got the two original imports, bred them together, was expecting a nice clutch of T positive babies, and had a clutch load of normals living back in me. Bred the double hets this year, got this T negative albino visual from the 1 in 16 odds, which I'm calling the lilac because of its kind of purplish hue. And then with kind of some of that Mocha project, I was able to also produce Mocha granites this year, which we talked about, and then the Mocha ultra platinum, ultra bright, whatever distinction you care to make between those two.
I just call them ultras.
Entities. People get
too caught up in it.
Mocha platinum because that name sounds cool, but there's some that are clearly like more platinum-y looking, and there's some that are like not, but whatever. People can call them what they call them. It's Borneos.
Yeah, exactly. People are gonna get upset about it one way or the other, so they can be upset. I don't know. They're cool looking, so, and I can't wait to see them when they're really a little bit bigger. Like, it's so exciting to see them as they're hatching, and then looking at the little things that I look at in them, and I'm like, oh, this thing is really going to start to accentuate as it gets bigger, and then this thing is probably going to, tone down a little bit, and then,
Yeah.
if the color intensity changes, it's just going to be like these things are going to go crazy.
Yeah, well, it's been super interesting. I was able to prove out Mocha, what was that, in 2019. So it's, it's not like we have this is the first time any have been, raised from neonate to adult. The animal that came in was a wild-caught adult. So, it really is interesting to kind of get a better idea for maybe trying to predict where these colors are going to go, because there's just such an absurd range in the color expression of the mutation. Like, I can't even put clear walls between it, in terms of giving it a finite, definite look. There's some that are deep dark purple, and there's some that are just 90 degrees the other way. There's some that get that weird green color. It's just they're just neat snakes. So it's been really interesting, kind of getting a better feel for kind of the profile of colors that you're able to work with more longer term, which of course, as neonates, they're just dripping with a level of color that is, it certainly, again, when proving them out, it fell far outside of the range of what I predicted they would look like.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But literal excitement, watching this come and the first round and then the second round has just been super exciting for me. Scooping up those first ones, they just keep getting better and better and better and better. And seeing these next ones, I'm just like, oh man, these things are going to be even cooler.
Yeah, it's just again, it's absurd, and it's such a long time coming. This was definitely a project that I worked from ground zero on establishing, and that it takes so much time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes potentially a lot of heartbreak. These are not necessarily easy tasks to accomplish. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not rocket science by any stretch of the imagination, but it does take some effort to get these animals desensitized and acclimated to being on the opposite side of the world. So, and then to breed them together and get a bunch of double hets and be like, oh gosh, this was the start of a project, not the end of one.
Exactly. And you're like, crap.
I have a lot of holdbacks.
It worked out. It ended up just, the payout was more than worth it, but man, that was certainly a bummer clutch at the time. I mean, nothing's ever a bummer, but it was certainly the most
disappointing at the moment.
Yeah, of what I was expecting and thought to have, justifiably expected, because there was really 2.1 T positive Borneos that came in. I got the lone male, which ended up being the Mocha, and then the other pair went to someone else who bred them and got a bunch of T positive albino babies that you would expect to have it. And then that male died, so I ended up with that female, bred it to my male that came out of the same shipment, same time, same everything. That was not compatible. And looking back at it, the adults look very different from each other, but it's Borneos. What else is new? So
yeah. Yeah, man. I remember seeing the ones that Michael Cole had, the sunsets at Tinley. I just remember looking at them and being like, man, it's just not what I had hoped for in an albino Borneo. When I saw the original T-neg albinos, I was like, okay, those are really cool. And then nothing really came of those initially. And then seeing the first pictures of T-positive albinos, I was like, maybe they'll be okay. And then I was like, Borneos, you just got to see them in person.
Yep.
And then I saw them in person, and I was just like, was not really, what I was hoping for. But talking to everyone who's seen the first, T positive albino red blood pythons that came out, they're going, okay, well, after 10 years or a couple, 3 generations of selective breeding, you can pick for better color and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, maybe, but it just,
you really are starting from zero. And, I definitely don't want to badmouth at all on sunset stuff. There's still a lot of directions people can take that. And it definitely is a different tone of albino. It's just a different snake. And obviously a critical necessary component to making the T negative. So T-neg,
we'll
see. I'm excited. yeah, I'm excited to see, directions people take both projects in, because clearly they both need to be taken in directions to end up going in the same direction. So, I think in the process, we might give give room for Sunset to also do its own, make its own space for what it can look like.
Absolutely. And I already know there's a couple people who have got like ideas where they want to go with the Sunset projects, and I'm really excited to see where they go with that.
Yeah,
and then,
it's not.
Oh, go ahead.
It's not dissimilar to what I feel like T positive and T negative red bloods, where like there's some directions where you can take those two morphs and end up with very different places, and some of them look better than others. Like there's some things I would breed into T positive to get a certain type of look that I don't think would look as well in T negative, and kind of vice versa. So
Yeah.
it's just it's picking your paint,
Mm-hmm. It's like the T positive albino ivory blood pythons as opposed to the T negative ivories. The T positive ivories look awesome. They look really, really cool. And as they get bigger, they just get better. And then most of the T negative albino ivories, I was very underwhelmed with what I was like, oh man, it's going to be white with like red bricks. And then you see it and it's like a off yellow snake with like a whitish, and it's just like not.
Man, that one was a goofy one too, because like that's what 90% of them look like. But then every once in a while, you'd end up with just a traffic.
See one. It's yeah.
Then,
like
the
just
opposite
got one. Yeah.
I had the one that looked damn close to leucistic. Like it had very low pattern black and was a lighter color ivory. So like that combined, it was like a base white color with not a lot of black turned white in the T negative. So it was just really close to a Lucy blood. Yeah. So the red blood python stuff this year, I'm trying to think. I had a Lily Batrix at T positive that I bred to the T positive Lily Ivory, and so that was just all sorts of, what would that be? White lightning and what do they call the T positive version of that?
No, is it not electrostatic? It's
No, it is the electrostatic. Yep. Yeah, the electrostatic.
Yeah, electrostatic. Yeah.
The T positive batik ivory, and then these have some lily going on, which the lily and some of the matrix offspring just did like all sorts of crazy stuff, having it from both sides. So I'm super excited about lily stuff, and I also bred that same male to slackline stuff this year. So just throwing all sorts of confusing genetics together, and just ended up producing some really cool stuff. So I'm just trying to figure out what I think lily is. Going back to our tendency to want to put things in boxes, like it seems tempting to throw the word dominant on it, like, but it almost feels a little bit more than that. Like when I have lily stuff, it almost seems like stuff I can pick out as being lily-esque I can see in probably 75% of the offspring. And so, I don't know if that's just me wishful thinking, looking for stuff that isn't necessarily there, but I kind of am thinking that, so there's kind of like inherited epigenetic traits that are expressed along, later on in life. Epigenetics is, what makes a stomach cell, and, a lung cell type thing. They both have the same DNA. If you sequence them, they would be the same. And yet these two cell types are expressing their genomes in different ways. Well, the same kind of thing occurs really throughout our life in a bunch of different processes. But essentially what I'm thinking is that, like, you can kind of picture it as like a voice yelling to the genome, hey, everyone who's making red, make more red. Everyone who's making black, make more black. And what is inherited is not the make more black gene, make more red gene. It is the voice in the past to most of the offspring that is, given the thumbs up on making more red and more black. And so it's kind of just ramping up the production that is already occurring. And that's the way it's able to kind of be passed down and kind of a super majority of the offspring, and not just, 50% dominant, one half has it, one half doesn't. It really does seem like Oh, Lily, that is a good idea. We should start looking like Lily. Everyone look
We
like
should
Lily.
all do this. Yeah, man. It's
And
so interesting to see
when you think
the way
about
that some of that plays out. Yeah.
exactly, and when you think about that as a genetic option, it kind of makes way more of the Borneo stuff make sense in terms of like why you can have stuff that doesn't really operate neatly within Mendelian genetics. You know, clearly has some bases in that, but there also seem to be differences in how those are expressed. And you know, if you can kind of think of that expression as an idea that a genome is able to pass along to another genome, that's
Yep.
kind of epigenetics. And so that's kind of what I think could be a mechanism for again, how you have Lily stuff that just, you know, gets passed along in a ton of the offspring.
Yeah.
Or
I was just going to say
Lily
that. Yeah,
and
with
normal
the
bloods
Borneos.
have a lot of, you know, overlapping traits, and so it's easy to pick out what you want to see. But you know, I'm an optimist, so.
I would say that with a bunch of the Borneo stuff, because like I bred a male ultra granite who has like blue expression tones to him to a granite striped het ultra, and or no, I bred him to the het ultra black trait female. And the way that the black trait is not supposed to be expressed in a lot of the offspring, it was actually passed on to a lot of the offspring. And then the blue trait, the way that it was expressed was like either muted by the black trait or like hyper expressed. And it's just like, it doesn't make sense on the like, oh, if you look at how it should have broken down, that's not how it should have broken down. But just seeing how it actually played out in the offspring is like, you know, it's interesting.
Yeah, no, man, it's a ton of fun that we get to play with these sliding scales of genetics and somehow end up producing kind of really neat stuff. You know, it really is an absolutely absurd way to make a living that like I think a lot of times we stuck in our industry bubble like forget, but like it truly is a absurd concept to breed these mutant snakes together and somehow turn that into a living. Like that is that's an absurd thing. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I love it, but you know, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't tell you that you can make a living doing anything. I mean,
you know, it really is interesting. But yeah, the you know, I've been trying to obviously, you know, not do commercial production at my facility. You know, this being a just super aberrant year of you know, everything producing. You know, everything I produced was stuff where I was like, this is stuff I've worked a long time on, and I really want to see what happens when we throw it together. And you know, it's hard to complain about having a great year with every pairing being a thought out type thing. You know, but I've been trying to scale that back, and what I've really been focusing a lot on lately are my obscure and rare, weird python species. And so this other building, not the display building, this other building I'm building is a biosecure building. So it has these big double doors that open up, and there's kind of a window front that opens into a small vestibule. So I'm able to have people, you know, look through the windows and see me go through this little vestibule, which is kind of like a gowning room where there's, you know, foot baths, and it's basically like a little, you know, a little area to scrub up and make sure you're clean walking into the colony. And then, you know, I kind of time it with my automations for various indicators on indicating you to open door, close the door, and walk through for correct time to kind of sterilize, give contact time for sterilizers and stuff like that. So, you know, the concept is really to show people that without a whole lot of additives to existing infrastructure, you can really put in this layer of biosecurity that is, I mean, you guys know as well as anyone, is there's nothing even hinting at that in the industry as it stands now. And, you know, talking about absurd ways to make a living, there's a lot of people who wrap up a lot of money in these animals. And, you know, biosecurity is a huge investment that people oftentimes overlook, because it's one of those things where it doesn't have a payoff if it works. You know, if biosecurity works perfect, your colony is extremely boring, and there's no reason to have biosecurity because there's no path, you know. So it's one of those things where it's hard to convince people that there's value in it until they lose everything
everything
in the process. And at that point, it's hard to uncork that bottle. So, it really, I'm taking the prompting by the state as an invitation to really kind of turn this place into my idea showroom as it relates to managing the biosecurity of captive colonies, as it relates to managing the caging of the actual animals themselves. I've been working on my hybrid rack cage system for a while, and I'm, ended up using it in kind of really interesting ways for the Halmahera pythons, if you guys want to go down that pipeline. But I guess before we do that, it just, there's I basically built a colony of really kind of cool pythons. So I have representations of almost every clade of Pythonidae. I don't really know that I want to commit to getting every species. That seems like a lot of work for a short thing to tout. Whereas instead of kind of, getting representation of everything, but having some species that I really want to go deep on and make sure that they're represented adequately in captive populations. And so for me, that's largely, I would say the two projects I take the most seriously have been the Papuan pythons and then the Halmahera scrubs.
Hell yeah. Have you reached out to Chuck Poland at all to talk to him about the Halmaheras or no?
Yep. Yeah. No. Yeah. I've definitely talked to Chuck about it, and yeah, it seems pretty in line with what I'd expect, which would just be, don't touch them, don't look at them, they don't exist, forget you have them. Yeah. So yeah, it's the caging that I built is so it's an elevated freedom breeder level that fits a suspended cage with a tub underneath. And for the Halmaheras, I went ahead and put a solid bottom on that, except for a small hole, so that the tub underneath is essentially entirely dark and safe and stuff for them. And then the top part, instead of having normal plexiglass sliding doors, I made solid PVC, 1/4-inch sliding panels for one half, and the other half I left as like plexiglass. But I have a cover for it that covers basically the entire front. So the entire front is just a wall of, sliding PVC. There's nothing to see except for a little peephole that you can open up and look through the plexiglass and see the animal. And
just for a moment.
Yeah. Just a moment. And so, I've been incredibly surprised at they have the reputation of being a shy animal, and they are, but I was very surprised about how quickly, given the option of not being seen at all, that they're really able or willing to put themselves out, outside hides a lot more frequently. So I have one male that I would say 90% of the time he's coiled up like a green tree python smack dab in the middle of the cage. And I know that wouldn't be happening if he thought there was
if it was open,
a snowball's chance that I could see him, So it's really cool that I have this modified system to really kind of provide them the security they need, but still provide me the flexibility of being able to maintain them in a much easier way. And so again, I'm able to I have this cage essentially split into two components, the top part and the bottom part. And so, I'm cleaning half the cage at the time. So I never even, I got these animals, I think since April is when I first started getting in the homes. And I've not touched them since putting them in the cage. My fingers have not physically touched a python since putting him in there.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much what it takes.
Yeah. And at this point, they pretty much all eaten, and so that is a huge relief for the species. It definitely is. And I started getting into scrubs close to 2 years ago now, where I started with some neonate captive Merauke's to kind of dip my feet into the species, but on animals that were of a solid enough background that I wasn't really having to lean on skills of establishing them. And then creeped on up to some of the bar necks and stuff like that, which you are working with, trying to establish some of those animals. Now I have a Highland pair represented, but then finally at that point felt like I'd done enough work with wild-caught scrubs to kind of get a feel for what stresses them, what doesn't, how they like to use a cage, how I can provide that in a way that doesn't, sacrifice either of those two parameters, I guess. And so, then decided that it was worth taking on the challenge of Halmaheras. And, you try and find the smallest animals you can, which, really, you're left with really what's available. So, it's wishful thinking more than it is anything else, but you still do your best. And, yeah, just super happy with the group I have. Just so much variation, and they're very neat pythons. They're very pretty, but in a way that's not as flashy as some of the other scrubs.
Hmm. Now, is Florida considering Tracy Eye as like grouped under Amethystina or no?
As far as I'm aware, they're not, but I've not asked for explicit
I don't want to
clarification on
ask.
that.
Yeah.
You know, obviously I include them with my species inventory and stuff like that, and they were, you know, so yeah.
Okay. I was just curious because
yeah, I'm not sure.
as they
That's
break
kind of
those
one of those
down.
things where I would rather than ask, like probably try and apply for a permit and kind of just see how it goes.
Mhm.
You know, to bring some in potentially, but at this point, you know, I still microchip them and, like I said, including them on inventories and stuff like that. But you know,
Yep.
the fact that they were willing to explicitly label King Horneye as being different from Amethystina would, in my mind, indicate that the same distinction could have been drawn between Halmaheras if that was something that he felt was necessary.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I've had a couple conversations with people recently where they're like, "Oh, they're not different species; they're just different localities." And I'm like, "You can't look at a barnack, like a sarong barnack, and look at a Merauke and tell me that it's the same species. It's just not.
I mean,
They're just
well,
not."
you do like the simple math of like every other species that's divided by that mountain range, and like they're different. They're gonna be different. They're just
They're just.
I'm doing that paper for you now. They're different. Like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because if they can have a Biak green tree python and do the genetic analysis on it, and it's like several degrees different from a Jayapura, and people look at them and they go, they're both a green snake that hangs on a tree, but they're like genetically more different than like a Burmese python and a reticulated python, and people still are like, no, they're just a different locality. It's like maybe look a little deeper, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah, all those Australasian pythons are just, it's super neat when you look through the taxonomy of that area of the world. You know, I have Timors, which are just the weirdest python that like don't fit into any niche. Like they're related to a retic, and yet nothing about them really reminds me of a retic. Like they're halfway between a retic and a liasis and a scrub python. And then I have some of the water pythons, which are just, it's hilarious to me that like they are exactly like an Arodia water snake in python form. Like I'm like, what is it about being an aquatic animal in that size range that means you have to bite and crap and just be a terrible animal all the way around? Like there's just something about that biotype that requires that.
A lot of dangerous things on the water's edge, you know?
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, that's true. I just want to highlight Jay Muller's comment.
Thank you, Jay Muller.
Thank you for the super chat. Loving this. We appreciate it. Thank you for hanging out, listening to Steve talk about all these amazing things and how potentially unfortunate you could describe a Timor python.
Yeah, man. And they just never run out of pee. It is like really incredible. They're
impressive.
Yeah, they really are. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of fun to be had in the clade of Pythonidae.
Yeah. And I think that once they start to do some more genetic analysis on the scrubs, they're going to find that there's like lots of more different species like than what's generally considered right now.
It goes back to the arbitrary designation of a species anyway that fits into one of the 26 different definitions. So, you know, you find one that works for you, and I'll find a plant one that says, I don't know, plants do really weird things evolutionarily. So like, yeah, viruses do even weirder things. They like just steal random bits of genetic material, and so it's like different portions of the genome have different evolutionary histories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, yeah, biology doesn't fit into boxes like we think, and so you know, you just do your best.
They're like, but it's the theory of evolution, and you're like, you're like, it doesn't always fit right in the box, you know?
Yeah.
There was a meme I saw. There was a meme I saw that was like an ocean wave coming up and someone like trying to tack little pins into it, and it was like modern taxonomy. Like it's just a snapshot of, you know, yeah.
It's awesome. Hell yeah. So, are there any other like species that you're looking to add? Are you trying to get some Dunn's pythons, or you're like, I got the other Lyasis, it's okay?
I don't really feel a pull towards that species, at least not yet. I finished out the Savus this year, so I'm pretty okay with representation on Lyasis. I'm really happy with my talkin group. I was able to find 3 captive bred neonates this year, which is like,
That's awesome.
literally, I can count on one hand the number of captive bred neonates I've seen. I can count on one finger the number of captive bred neonates I've seen prior to this. So yeah, I was feeling really good about that. So I have a group of 2.3 of those, and they're just, God, they're awesome. I do need Ruska pythons. I do need diamonds, brettles, and I really like the Brisbane locality coastals. So I need that whole segment of Pythonidae represented. But what I've been trying to do is take care of all the pesky Indo stuff that is coming from wild sources. All the other species
Could
that I'm
get
looking
shut
to add
down.
could get shut down. All the other species I add are want to have are readily available captive bred, so I don't really feel that same urgency as the kind of some of these other species to really get them passed through. So I do these big, huge year-long quarantines with lots of testing throughout, because the whole concept is to go into a biosecure Python arc as a representation of a biosecure snake colony. And so yeah, it was I've been batching all the animals out about a year at a time. So it's what do I want to pass through quarantine this year, kind of setting that up well in advance. And so yeah, this year it's just finishing out all that pesky Indo stuff, and then some of the next years I'm going to start looking for some of the more commonly available captive bred stuff to really build up some of that portion of the colony. But yeah, so rough scale pythons definitely on my list. Angolan pythons, womas, like I said, all that Morelia stuff. I just got done. I'm getting close to a point where I think I can be done on green trees. So I have both species of them represented. So I don't want a ton of green trees, but I like having just enough to have green trees.
I don't really like green tree pythons all that much, to be honest.
There's a lot to not like about them, and man, it has been I know we said we wouldn't talk too much about virus stuff, but man, you try and find a virus-free green tree python, and you're flipping a coin is better odds, to be honest. So
Yeah.
And most of the time it doesn't matter, but who's going to draw the line as to when it does? So I have 2.5 colonies of green tree pythons. I have the stuff that made it through quarantine, the stuff that's in quarantine, and the stuff that didn't make it to the first draft of testing. That is going to go into some mystery colony that I'm, I guess, going to have in perpetuity. So, because they're healthy animals. So, like, what am I going to do? But,
Yeah.
Oh boy. Nah, green trees can stay far away from me.
Yeah.
I mean, it a lot of these viruses seem pretty species specific, but at the same time, it's these are dice that you're rolling on that we have no idea what the real odds are on. So with that knowledge as you will.
Pretty much, man. No, thank you. I'm all set.
Yeah, not necessarily a gamble I'm willing to take there.
Yeah. Green trees are cool. They're not that cool for me. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, so 50% have been positive, but of that, I think I've only lost one. Like, I've only had one develop an actual RI, and it ended up dying from it. So I had one that was wheezy for a week and then shed and was fine. And I have one that was like, damn, I really thought you would not be positive. So.
Damn.
Damn.
Oof.
Yeah. Oof. That's it's a lot for me, man.
Yeah. No. Yeah. The way I kind of think about it is, I kind of have a colony that I've done my best to try and get to a point where I understand the pathogens that are going through it. But like, you get the difference between a virus negative snake and a really happy snake may not be all that much, at least in terms of how it comes out on a test. So, I'm at a point where I have a building full of really happy snakes, and then I have another biosecure building that anything going into it was given a huge quarantine at the beginning of it, testing with the intention of going into a sterile colony, or it was born in that room, having never shared a room with any of the adult parents
Anything
of
else,
it,
yeah.
and at the end of the day, your safest option on biosecurity is just to split your neonates away from your adults. Like if you're, at the end of the day, it's that alone is a good place to start in terms of drawing a line somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we definitely need to get you back and talk more virus stuff and biosecure options and stuff, because I'm sure since the last time we've spoken, there's been new things that have come up, and I always get excited when I see you post stories when you're in the lab just doing tests on stuff, because I'm like, man, this is that research that needs to be getting done, that it's going to answer some next question.
Yeah, it's so cool because I really do love the lab work. Like, I had that as like on my bucket list of like, I want to end up in a position at some point in life where I was able to do PCR type lab work like that. And like, sure enough, it fell into my lap. So, great. It's awesome. I love it. Yeah. So I've been really super distracted on getting the facility renovated and stuff, but I'm getting really into the semester now of going deep on some of the lab work. So yeah, that's really going to be starting to ramp up, and really at the portion of where I'm at of my PhD now, it's really about scaling that up to really. So up until now, I've kind of proven that we can do these tests using these various techniques, and it's really been about trying to get the techniques established. And now it's like, okay, well, now we have those techniques proven out, so take it and scale it up to whatever sample size you need. So yeah, it's been enjoyable, and I know now I'm looking at the upward slope of the grind of doing lab work, where there's going to be a lot of days counting cells and infecting with virus and doing all that kind of experimental manipulation. So yeah, at some point in the future, I'll have to get back on, and I'll probably get a point where I can. Right now, I can tell you kind of how we did stuff, but not what happened when we did it. So
right,
yeah.
So that means when we have Steve back on after many of these tests have been run, he will look much more downtrodden and run down.
Yeah, no, it's not like, building out a facility in the middle of my PhD, as in, it's been a breeze. It's so easy.
He's like, I'll do two. Why not?
No, if we didn't know and you didn't say anything, dude, we would have been like, oh, you just came back from the beach, bro. It's no problem.
Just chilling, man.
But yeah, I really am excited because, this is the facility renovations are kind of part of my 3 to 5 year plan anyway, post PhD, where I really wanted to kind of get into some of this niche consulting and really show some of my ideas to kind of take some of the stuff to scale. Obviously, I have a pretty good network of facilities of scale to kind of know what's a good idea, what can run, what can't, what's kind of wishful thinking, and having my own facility to kind of find where I think the line is between those two before being able to take some of these ideas and scaling it up. And so yeah, it'll be really cool to have a place to come through where it's like, these are the manifestation of some of my ideas, and you can kind of see the returns a little bit better in terms of actually managing the species and both the data for them, the management of the colonies themselves, and then just novel ideas for infrastructure and how it can all kind of be meshed together into the same thing.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
That's
where it's at, man.
Absolutely. All right, so we've gone past our hour mark, but that I don't care about that because we love you, Steve.
Yeah.
So you know the deal. Our wrap up question: what in the realm of reptiles, be it something that you selfishly want to talk about in your own collection, or something that you've seen online, or anything like that, has you really excited about reptiles?
I mean, it's pretty hard to beat that T positive albino anaconda that was just produced. I mean, that is a project that, like, I know you guys know as well as I, like, we have been watching that. I remember photos of when that animal first came in. Like, it has been a long time to see it really come to fruition, and the background of all the people who have been involved with it, and all of that. And you kind of look at it and you're like, oh, this is definitely a albino that is it's T positive, but it is closer to a T negative than it is a caramel albino. So it kind of fits within that mental paradigm as well. So yeah, that animal is really cool to see because again, it just
Yeah.
you know the work that went into it, and it was not a small thing.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, dude! When I saw that picture, I was like, "Oh my goodness, look at it! It looks incredible."
Yeah, you
It really does. Yeah.
reported that to me, and I literally like stopped everything I was doing and showed everybody at the shop I was at. I was like,
I literally walked around with it. I was like, "Did you guys see this yet? Did you guys see this yet?" And Megan Kelly crushed it on the
Yeah.
T-Paws albino anaconda, green anaconda.
It's like the pied bloods. Like you knew it was coming from such a distance away.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And yet, you can think about it, you can wish it into existence, and nothing beats when you actually get a chance to see it for the first time. Like it just, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Damn. Yep. Hopefully we get to see one of those in person at a show at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, not here in Florida, but
yeah, you're traveling for that one.
yeah.
Oh,
It'll be
man.
worth it.
Oh, absolutely. All right, Steve. So if people want to find out more about you and what you're doing, where can they come to find you?
So most of the stuff that I'm willing to post publicly, I'll post over on the Reptilis Instagram page, and then also a lot of this stuff is going to end up probably, getting converted into YouTube videos. I feel like that's going to be a better format for some of the ideas and, kind of just to get a better idea of what it is that I'm accomplished and some of the stuff here. A lot of the ideas I work with, I don't know that I am, I don't share them widely. So yeah, the stuff that does make it to the public surface is over at Reptilis. And then if I really, really like you and I know you, ST1000 is my what is it? The Finsta? Is that what it used to be?
Yes, 100%.
If you
That's
don't
mint.
put Finsta on that bio now, I'm going to be real upset.
That's too funny. Fuck yeah. All right, man. Dude, it was awesome catching up with you tonight. Thank you so much for coming on. Dude, I'm excited to see the next steps that everything is going on in your facility. I'm really pumped.
Absolutely. Yeah, me too. And when I make stuff that amuses me, I feel like I'm on the right track. So
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, that's where it's at. That's where it's at.
Thank you guys for having me. It's great as always.
Man.
Absolutely.
I'll have to do it again sometime soon.
Absolutely.